All right, let's get my microphone turned on and we'll get started. What's going on, everyone in the chat? Thank you for showing up. Tonight, we have a guest again. So this evening, I want to say up front that for quite some time, I've been curious, and you have all probably heard me ask questions, hypothetical or otherwise, as far as, or rhetorical even, as far as how the law affects a lot of the technology around us. Well, we found a lawyer who specializes in technology. So I don't think we could have anyone better to address some of these questions that we have about it. Now, I do want to state up front that, as with most professionals, we don't want to pick his brain and make this the, free legal advice episode or anything like that. But he said he is happy to discuss these topics with us. So this should be a lot of fun. So real quickly, before I bring him on, I want to tell you who we are talking to. This is Richard Georges, and he is a lawyer, poet, author, educator. He practices real property corporation wills, trusts, and estates in Pinellas County, Florida. He writes the FutureLawyer column, and he gives seminars on technology and the law. So, right up our alley for the most part. So let's get him in and on and going. Hey, Wayne Taylor, how are you? Good morning to Australia. Richard, I am going to attempt to bring you back in here. Let's see if we can. I'm getting fancy with the controls here. And how do I unmute your microphone? Here we go. All right, let's see if we have. Let's see. What is going on here?
It says I can unmute myself, which I did.
There we go. We have you. Hey, welcome to the stream, Richard.
It's Rick, please. Thank you.
It's Rick. Okay, good. Good.
Richard is what my mom used to call me when she was TO'd at me. So
okay, and I really thought I was doing the right thing because I've seen the name Georges before, and right. I was corrected when I mispronounced it, so I assumed it had to be George, which was what I was told then. But yeah. You said it's pretty much become Americanized at this point.
Yeah, it is George, but ever since I was a little boy, people always pronounce the S even though it's silent. And they made the G hard, so it came out George or Georges. So
gotcha.
I go with the flow. Whatever, call me anything but late for dinner, and I'm good.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So you have technically, I think you called it a legal blog. Was that the right term?
Yes. Well, yeah. In the beginning, lawyers that started back in the early '90s had static websites, and a lot of lawyers just have no concept of what it means to have contact with people over the internet, and we didn't then. So they would make it a biographical thing, and they'd put up all their awards and all that other stuff. And in 2005, I discovered blogging, which basically is a updated frequently site of issues about a particular legal topic. Mine morphed into something about what I like, were technology and gadgets and how they apply to the practice of law. And I was teaching lawyers and judges how to do that anyway. So basically, I would write about gadgets that I found, or websites that I found, or legal software that I found, or how it applies to the practice of law. And I started doing it in 2005, and I've been doing it for 13 years.
So you've probably been doing this online longer than anyone else when it comes to this category.
I am close. There are some lawyers that I know that we all began in the early 2000s, and so I would imagine I'm in the top 50.
Okay. Now I attempted to show your website here, and I don't know what happened. I'm going to try this one more time because I want everyone to see. For some reason, when I double click on this, let's see, are we going to be able to present, Mike? I think we are. So if you haven't seen it already, folks, it is FutureLawyer.com. And there's a caricature here that looks just like you. So a good job on whoever did the work there. I've been thinking about doing that for a while, but you have various articles.
Well, let me tell you how to do that. Go to Fiverr.com, Fiverr.com, and they have artists that for $25 will draw anything you ask them to draw. And I gave this guy a photograph, a headshot, and this is what he came up with. And I said, I want to combine law and technology. And he did such a fine job that I ordered blow-ups, and that's how they make their money, is when you order copies.
Right.
But
right.
Yeah, you could have a great one. You probably get a bobblehead like the ones in back of you there.
That would be perfect, actually.
But go to Fiverr.com and they'll hook you up.
I will check it out. Now, there was one thing that I kind of not thought to ask you, but were you kind of following the whole deal when Mark Zuckerberg went and spoke in front of that little, I don't want to call it an inquest, but that conversation that he had a while back.
Yes.
And the reason that comes to mind is because obviously you've got your eye on technology, and because you practice law, and those two things I believe are going to just become more and more intertwined as we come up with, different types of legal implications on this stuff. During that interview, it was as if he was explaining to the panel how Facebook works, how a cell phone works.
We do that a lot, as a matter of fact. Yeah, you can assume that those people up in Washington know nothing about technology. Uh, they are from a generation, and I'm part of that generation. I just happen to break from the pack. But what happens is, uh, as people gain power and influence and big jobs, they tend to delegate. And one of the things that they delegate is technology. Just as we were talking earlier about learning how to type. My mom made me do it when I was in high school, and it turned out to be the most valuable skill that I ever had when computers became popular. Um, we all think of things that are beneath us, or at least these guys do, and they just don't learn about technology because they don't have to. And so what happened was Zuckerberg goes up there, and they don't know anything about privacy either. They could have really grilled him if they wanted to, because Facebook's had some real privacy problems, allowing people to buy data and things of that nature. But yeah, he was in effect educating them on Facebook because none of them are on Facebook.
Right. And this is a bit of a concern when we have people who are involved in the legislative process, writing these laws or determining what the next step is going to be. And I understand technology moves fast, and
Right.
typically the legal process, not necessarily so much.
Right.
And I could see a lot of headaches, a lot of problems developing because of those two things being so different as far as the way that they're approached. I guess we'll see, but that is what this stream is all about.
Right.
What did Wayne say? I love lawyers in Australia. Mind you, most are criminals lawyers. It's a game with us police versus lawyers. LOL the win with young kids, but us old dogs, we learned their tricks a long time ago. Wayne is actually in Australia, and he has been a police officer for, I want to say, 35 years, something like that. Technology is something law enforcement and justice system 99% down under have no clue. Okay. So one of the things that comes up quite often, Rick, and we briefly spoke about before the stream, and that is artificial intelligence and the number of not only laws that we'll probably see and policies put into place, but obviously lawsuits as well. When the thing at the top of my, the forefront of my mind when we talk about artificial intelligence, and I'm probably trying to look 100 years into the future easily, because again, as we discussed, the AI that we think of when we watch a sci-fi movie where it's just like us and it has the same conversations and makes the same decisions, seems like that's quite a ways off. And there's really questionable as to whether we can ever have that human element replicated in any way.
Yeah, the substantive human interaction is impossible for robots or artificial intelligence. First, let's talk about artificial intelligence. It's not really AI, it's cognitive computing. In effect, we're teaching computers through machine learning and other technology to make decisions based on large data sets. Now, this can be very valuable, and lawyers are using it all the time, and it's becoming more popular. E-discovery is a good example. If you have millions of documents and complex litigation, you can basically scan them into a database, and our AI engine can analyze that data and spit out relevant documents. That's one way. We use it for document assembly, legal software that takes templates of legal form documents, and we input or answer questions. The computer asks a question, we answer it, do it in interview format, and at the end, it spits out a document that we can then edit and review. So artificial, and we bill that way. All of our time and billing software automates all of that billing process. 40 years ago, when I sent a bill or a group of bills, it'd take 2 days because I had to handwrite time slips. I then had to hand the data to a secretary. She had to type it out, add up the numbers, and put the bill in an envelope, and then we mailed it. Now it's press a button, and all the time that I've entered through the month in computer format, the bills come out of a printer, and I just stuff them in an envelope and mail them. All the addition is done for me and all of that. So we've been using cognitive technology or cognitive computing for a long, long time to simplify the tasks of lawyering. But that will not replace lawyers. Okay, lawyers will never be replaced. We're like roaches, because once you start creating this technology, the technology creates lawsuits. Example: automated cars. Wouldn't it be nice if we had a car and you didn't have to drive it? Okay, you just press a button, tell it where you're going to go, and the car takes off and goes. Well, the problem with that is, what happens if the car has an accident? What happens when they run over somebody? Well, do you sue the manufacturer of the car? Do you sue the manufacturer of the software? Do you sue the individual driver that's supposed to be supervising? All of these lawsuits come from technology. Drone technology, very good example. We're using drones more and more and more these days to fly over and take pictures for real estate closings. But now the drones are being weaponized. What happens if your neighbor flies his drone over your house? Is that trespassing? Where does the airspace end and where does your property right begin? There's already been lawsuits. There are actually lawyers now specializing in drone law. So, again, you're never going to get rid of us. You may as well just resign yourself to that fact. It's kind of like there's no more privacy anymore. There will always be lawyers.
Yeah. And, it's interesting. I think to an extent, if you talk to a lot of people, perception wise, lawyers kind of get a bad rap. There's always, oh, these lawyers this and these lawyers that. And if you could sink a boat with lawyers in it, I don't even remember how the joke goes, but I do know this. We certainly have a lot of lawyers, but we wouldn't have so many lawyers if we didn't have so many laws. And the over legislation in this country, it's at a point where I think that most people are probably committing some sort of crime at any given time, or they have recently, even if it's something as obscure as buying lobster that are the wrong size. Like I read this article recently. I mean, there's just so many crazy laws out there.
But you need to understand something. The reason those laws are there and the reason litigation exists isn't the lawyers. The lawyers are a tool. The reason is we're human beings, and human beings living together fight with each other. And in order to maintain a civil society, you have to have some way to resolve those disputes. And the legal system is what we've got. Now, there are different kinds of legal systems. In a dictatorship, one guy makes the laws and one guy makes the decisions. So if you have a dispute in a dictatorship, it's cut off his head.
Yeah.
So I prefer our system, okay, in which everybody gets a say, in which everybody gets their day in court. But in order to have that day in court, we need help. And we are happy to provide that help.
Gotcha. Wayne said, Rick, biggest thing that stumps judges here is, I'm sorry, I read that twice. He said, you're not alone, Rick. I learned to type on manual typewriter back in 1984. Seriously, you could have had a chicken peck the keys. It was faster and better spelling than me. And
I actually like mechanical keyboards. As a matter of fact, I've gone back to them for my computer typing. I like the deep travel and I like the click. I like the sound. But yeah, I agree with you. My mom made me go when I wanted to play baseball one summer in high school, and I spent the whole summer in a room full of girls learning how to type. But as I said, it's a skill that you have to have these days. If you're a hunt and peck typist, you're just not going to get the job done. And to operate a computer, I don't like doing it by voice. Some people do. I like to type quietly and get the job done.
And I see your point. And because you brought that up, I'm curious, because these voice to text programs are getting so accurate nowadays that it seems like maybe eventually we will move away from keyboards altogether. I mean, it's certainly a good skill to have, but it also strikes me as a very unnatural thing to do with your hands, and we've seen some negative health effects from people sitting in front of keyboards.
There have been scientific studies, for instance, that say that note taking by hand is better for your mental ability to remember.
That makes sense.
Because what you're writing down travels to the brain, and it's the same thing with typing. For instance, I've got a very cool toy. I don't have it with me right now, or maybe I do. Hold on a minute. This is a Live Scribe digital pen. Now this is very cool because if you look inside here, there's a little infrared sensor underneath the ballpoint, but it's a regular ballpoint pen. So when you turn it on, a little light goes on, and it's connected via Bluetooth to your computer. And if you write on the paper that they provide, it's got invisible little dots all over it. As you write, the infrared records it, and it records it to a USB drive on the pen. Then when you plug the pen in or connect via Bluetooth to the software, you get a digital representation of your notes. It will also record.
Oh, interesting.
During a seminar, and it's $170. But this is the kind of thing that I use to take notes all the time, as opposed to speaking or dictating, because I remember it. When I'm writing, I am more inclined to remember what I wrote at a later date, and it helps my abilities. So I disagree that we will go all to digital. I mean, we will ask questions like we're doing it already. Alexa, Google Assistant, Siri, all of those assistants are good for asking questions or controlling the lights in our house, but they're not so good for communicating ideas or making notes for things that we want to remember.
Right. Did you happen to, and guys, thanks for bringing this to my attention. I thought there was something funny with the cameras here, and there was. And for some reason, my cameraman switch got clicked, and we couldn't see you, Rick. So I brought you on here. Everything should be working properly.
Oh, my God. I've got a face made for radio. I would prefer to go back.
Well, they get tired of looking at me, though, all the time. So right. Let's see. What do we had a couple more comments here. Come on, Rick. The law's out of control now. Everything is legislated. It's gotten ridiculous. I was reading a lawsuit out of USA recently where McDonald's was sued because they sold a guy a quarter pounder with cheese because he didn't want the cheese. Really? I don't know if that's okay, true or not.
What's that guy's name?
His name's Wayne Taylor.
And what's his address?
He's in Australia, actually.
Wayne. Now, how do you think that lawsuit got filed, Wayne? Because a client, a regular guy, goes to a lawyer and says, I want to sue McDonald's. Now, should the lawyer have taken the case? Perhaps not. But who institutes these wacky lawsuits? People do, not the lawyers. The lawyers are a tool. So, Wayne, don't harass the lawyers, harass the client.
Fair enough. So one thing that I started out with, and we've kind of pulled the rug out from underneath it, because as you pointed out, artificial intelligence doesn't really fit that definition word for word. Yeah. And my question was that if we reach a point, or if we, first of all, where is the definition of artificial intelligence, or when does a machine become thought of as being capable to make the types of decisions and judgments that we do? And the part B to that question would be, if that happens, if and when that happens, do we then consider them to have any sort of rights the way that we do? Because that's really what makes us human in the first place.
Yeah, this is a good question. The Turing test is commonly used to determine whether or not an intelligence is human. And it requires certain judgment calls that machines can't make yet, although some machines are getting pretty close. The problem is that I wrote about this today, as a matter of fact. Artificial intelligence won't be replacing lawyers or any other professional very soon, because artificial intelligence is incapable of doing something very basically human, and that is taking a second look. The post today, if you go to FutureLawyer.com, has a picture in which an elephant image is in a room, and it's called the elephant in the room, but a computer or artificial intelligence looking at that image doesn't see the elephant. Because in effect, when you look at those kinds of patterns, the human brain has the ability to look again and see the elephant in the pattern behind the picture. That's a very good article, by the way. Machine Learning Confronts the Elephant in the Room. It's in Quanta magazine, and I recommend the article. Go to the link if you go to my post.
I've got it up on the screen now so they can kind of see what you're talking about. Let me see if we can magnify
you can call it, it's called human sight or human judgment. It's one of the reasons we're human. We can't teach computers to do it yet. Now, I'm not saying that we won't be able to sometime in the future, I'm not saying the problem that you've got is who's teaching the computers? Humans are. For the same reason that some artificial intelligence engines have been accused of bias already. Their results have been biased. Their results have been discriminatory. And the reason for that is they share the biases of the humans that train them. It's impossible for a human not to program in those biases. But another reason why artificial intelligence, I don't believe, will replace humans in any profession is that they do one thing and they do it well. They analyze large data sets. They are able to take mountains of data and find answers to questions that we have about that data after analysis. Now, lawyers can use this, doctors are using it, hospitals are using it, medical decision makers are using it, diagnosticians are using it. Yeah, that's great, but you need the human to take that analysis and apply it to the problem. Nobody's ever going to go into a robot and say, I want to sue so-and-so. What are my chances? The robot may analyze the data and may be able to predict your probabilities, but the robot's never going to be able to go into a courtroom and argue a case and deal with the emotional needs. You know, half of what I do has nothing to do with law. Half of what I do is people coming into my office and they got a problem. And their problem might be legal, but it might also be emotional. It might be familial. You know, we live with dysfunctional families, don't we? Probably everybody listening has a member of the family that they can't be in the same room with. Well, those kinds of interrelationships are what creates the kind of conflict that creates litigation and why we need lawyers. Lawyers have to have more than a mere understanding of data or the law or the rules of law in order to practice law, in order to advise people, in order to consult with them, in order to assist them in solving human problems. So, all that said, yeah, I believe in augmented intelligence. Let's call it that instead of artificial intelligence. Let's augment our intelligence with the ability to analyze large data. You know, that's something that we as humans can't do, but we can teach computers to do. And
Right.
that's a real good reason why a lot of lawyers are using things like Ross Intelligence or those types of software programs now, because e-discovery has become impossible in complex litigation. If you've got 1 million documents and you send an e-discovery request to opposing counsel and they ship you 1 million documents in paper form, it would fill up trucks. Now, what are you going to do? Are you going to hire 150 people to go through every document? Do those people know what they're doing? What you do is you get the documents these days, you get it in electronic form via PDFs or document files, and you feed it to a computer, and e-discovery software analyzes it for keywords. You do keyword searches. There are other types of searches, which I won't get into here, but e-discovery nowadays is just discovering electronic data. And humans can't do that. So we use computers to do it. They augment our intelligence.
Okay. Fair enough. Now, Johnny Chang will often have questions that I am not able to answer, but I'm gonna shoot this to you anyways and see if you have
Yeah.
any input.
Now I cannot answer it, right?
Well, I don't. You cannot answer it. Like I said, sometimes it goes over my head. I'll be honest. But his question was: do artificial intelligence entice a self-determination as sentient entities? And I'm not sure how to take that, Johnny. Rick, you got it?
I think he's asking at what point do AI engines or AI computers or AI devices become sentient? And there is no answer to that question. It can't be answered yet.
Okay.
Sentience is a Latin term meaning human understanding. And by definition, a computer is not a human, at least not yet.
Right.
A computer in human form, I mean, we anthropomorphize them. If you look at the sci-fi or the science fiction robots, for instance, and some now, they're making sex robots, for instance. They're making robots that look like human beings. This recent TV series, Westworld, did you see that?
Oh yeah, that's it. That
Okay.
that topic comes up here quite often, actually.
Yeah, okay. Well, the robots in Westworld, all right, are sentient, but the technology doesn't exist yet for us to do that. It's
Right.
science fiction, okay? And I don't believe it's going to happen. But then again, in 200 years, as you said, who knows? We're not going to be here. You know, it's not something that we really are qualified to discuss right now. All we can discuss is where is the technology now and what do we know about the technology? And we can talk to scientists and they can tell us what they think is going to happen, but nobody really knows.
Right.
So the
Right.
answer to your question is, at what point do artificial intelligence engines become sentient? Nobody knows. Nobody can answer that question. You have asked an impossible question.
And you mentioned the Turing test recently. Did you happen to hear that phone call that they did at the Google I/O a few months
Yeah.
back?
Yeah. Does
What?
that pass it? That does not pass the Turing test. And the reason it doesn't is because all the voice on the other end is doing, they've anthropomorphized a computer that is merely a reservation system. I mean, it's
Oh,
impressive. I agree, it's impressive, okay, because they can hear the words that you speak. The computer can analyze those words, can apply it to their reservation system, which is also a computer, and can spit back what times are available. All right, and they make it sound like a human, but it's not making human judgments. If they were honest about it, they would have you throw them a curve, okay, like call the restaurant and say, when can I get a hair appointment? Or something of that nature.
oh, right.
If you throw a computer a curve that's not in its database, it doesn't know what to do. All right? It doesn't know what to do in the first place. It merely is parroting a response out of a database.
Sure. And since you said that, this is a curious idea here. So obviously, the responses that we are capable of making can be thought through, and we can differentiate those kinds of things. If you give me something that isn't right, I say, wait a minute, your question doesn't make sense because what you are trying to say is something different, and so forth. Now,
Second look, the elephant paradox.
right. And I would question as to whether we don't make those decisions, if our cognitive abilities are not based on our experiences as well. So they're actually sort of in our database at this point.
Yeah, but it's a different kind of cognitive decision. It's a decision that contains other elements: emotion, prejudice, bias, training, love. You can't teach love to a robot or an AI engine. Love is a concept that we don't even understand, but we know that we have it. And I don't want to get spiritual here, but call it a soul, okay?
Okay.
The human spirit or the human soul, so far, we can't duplicate. I was telling you about my deceased wife who died of brain cancer. The brain surgeons, they don't know anything about brain cancer. They've been studying it for decades. They are just as clueless as they were 40 years ago. They're getting a little bit better at digging into the brain and brain surgery and cutting out things. They're getting a little bit better at killing part of it, but nobody with a brain tumor survives very long. That's just the
Right.
fact.
Yeah.
And that kind of science, all right, is good, but it doesn't take in the human element. And that human element, that soul, that spirit, that 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 thing that we cannot describe, that some people believe in and some people don't, makes us more than just an animal. And I think every human being deep inside understands they are more than an animal. And to me, AI engines and computers and things of that nature are not even animals yet. They may be in the future. Who knows?
Okay, fair enough. And you raised some good points there. Hey, everyone, I want to show you real quick, in case you just got onto the stream, we are talking to Rick Georges. He has a website called FutureLawyer. Actually, the URL is futurelawyer.com. You should definitely check it out. He is a lawyer who is highly interested in technology, which is right up our alley. That's what we do here as well. And we certainly appreciate him coming on as a guest. I'm going to get to the comments here just in a second because I'm getting kind of behind on those questions. But I did want to bring up the link that Wayne posted. This was for the McDonald's customer suing for $5 million for unwanted quarter pounder cheese. And I will tell you this, Wayne, just off the top of my head, anytime I see Fox News, CNN, or the National Enquirer, I'm often skeptical about the articles or the information that's being transmitted, because those particular companies have really figured out how to get people's attention, and that's what they're good at doing. So maybe someone is suing for $5 million, but I'd say good luck. That would incur some costs, I would think, to the person who's filing the suit, right?
Yeah, and not only that, but I hate to speak ill of other lawyers, but some lawyers will claim egregious amounts of money to gain publicity,
Okay.
and so $5 million just doesn't mean anything. Uh,
Right.
some class action lawsuits, such as against Apple for the iPhone defects and so forth, when you add up the number of possible injured plaintiffs, can get into the millions of dollars. But a competent lawyer merely alleges damages in excess of whatever the jurisdictional limits of his particular state might be. You know, in Florida, if you want to get into circuit court, you just claim damages in excess of $75,000 and you're in, or $5,000 if you want to go into county court, that kind of thing.
Okay.
So, number one, whenever you see these huge amounts of money claimed in a lawsuit, that's red flag number one. Red flag number two is not every lawsuit succeeds. Many lawsuits don't get past the motion to dismiss stage. They are a flash in the pan. You see the headline, and keep in mind that human beings hire lawyers to file these lawsuits. Juries, okay, decide whether or not the lawsuit is legitimate or not after hearing testimony and evidence at a trial. So ultimately, if you're upset about huge verdicts, look inward. Go look in the mirror, because we are the ones as human beings who file these lawsuits, and as juries who decide these lawsuits, not lawyers.
Okay, and just as a side note on that, isn't it the case that often, and the McDonald's thing is a terrible example, but don't people often ask for a ridiculous amount of money, hoping that they can get a settlement without going to the court in the first place for a lower amount?
Well, sometimes, a good negotiator won't ask for an outrageous amount because they'll just get laughed at. But yeah, it's like any negotiation: buy low, sell high. Start with a high number. If you're buying a house, you know, or if you're selling a house, you're going to look for a range. But you know, first you got to prove your case. First
Yeah.
of all, you have to prove that there was negligence. You have to prove products liability. You got to prove the issues and the facts before anybody's going to give you any money. Um, Now, some people will settle claims just to get rid of the publicity or get rid of the possibility of a verdict. Uh, all of these are reasons why I practice real property, probate, and trust law and corporate law, so that I don't have to worry about those issues anymore. Early in my career, yeah, but not anymore.
Okay, fair enough. I'm going to try to go through some of these comments real quick. There are a couple really good ones I think will be
Okay.
perfect for you. Let's see what Johnny. I'm going to come back to yours because I think that's going to open up a can of worms. So I'll come back to that comment in a minute. Wayne said, actually, most lawyers do too. So, oh, what do too? So maybe okay, he was joking. Can machines be juror to another machine? I don't think we're there yet, Johnny. You probably got that from what we were talking about earlier. When we have androids and or robots that operate like Detroit Beyond Human, then we will have AI. We have false AI now. Siri, Bixby, and Google Assistant can't even power off our phones. Okay. Have anybody heard of an anime called Psychopaths that deal with the theme similar to the movie Minority Report? I haven't, but I think Minority Report is an interesting concept on its own, especially as we get to the point where we are more and more able to predict human behavior, especially based on the amount of data that's being collected on anyone.
We can predict probabilities using artificial intelligence to look at large data sets of information. However, where I part from Minority Report is the key to all of that were humans who had some kind of psychic power that doesn't exist. Okay, it's like ghosts; they don't exist. Get over it. That's not going to happen. Psychic power is a figment of the human imagination. So when you get over that, and yes, you can have artificial intelligence engines, and we do have now, that are capable of making decisions about large data sets. So if I take the data sets of crimes and criminals and I get a large enough data set, yeah, I can I can predict probabilities, but I can't predict certainty. Kind of like facial recognition. Facial recognition is easier because it's strictly scientific. The face can be proven to be different on every human being. So a facial recognition software can look at thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of faces and can measure them against a known data set of photographs of people that it knows about and can match them. Fingerprint analysis. We've been using computers to do that for a long, long time. A good example is the National Fingerprint Database. If you get a fingerprint and you have a known fingerprint, you can measure it against millions of others, and the computer is very good at analyzing all of that data quickly. That's what it does. But Minority Report, nope, we're not going to predict human behavior. Humans are too complex.
I agree completely with what you're saying. What I'm wondering is that when we look at the fear-based society that we live in here, where we say, oh, if you're this kind of person, everyone should be afraid. Let's say that we have a database that shows a person, like you said, according to these data sheets that we have, all this compiled information, there's a high probability that they may commit some sort of crime. They've exhibited behaviors that would indicate they're preparing to do so. Let's say like buying a lot of firearms in a short period of time and communicating with other people who are members of, if you stretch this enough, you see where I'm going with it, right? At a certain point, we're sort of doing this right now.
Well, we've done it in the past. There have been societies in the past, we call them dictatorships, in which human behavior has been spied upon, and there are some countries in the world that are doing it right now, whereby by your behavior, the society deems that you are a bad person, and they'll lock you up or they'll kill you. There are bloggers in parts of the world, for instance, who, exercising what we call the right of free speech, will say things in their blogs that gets them arrested, tried, and put in jail. I mean, it's happening today.
Yeah.
So, but the idea here is that our society is based upon, I thought, and as a good lawyer, I must tell everyone, you should think this too, innocent until proven guilty. Let's look at the facts, analyze the facts, and test those facts in a trial with cross-examination, and let an independent jury decide who's telling the truth and who's not. When you start saying that because there's a probability you're going to commit a crime, we're just going to arrest you first, what's the point of having a society that you call free? We wouldn't be a free society anymore. That's my problem with Minority Report. That's my problem with people that rely too much on technology. That's my problem with people that say that we should rely on computers to make our decisions for us. No, as soon as you do that, you lose your humanity, you lose your society, and you lose your freedom. And if there's one thing that I am strong on, it's free speech. I don't care whether it's speech that I disagree with. There used to be a time where you could say anything. Okay, the ACLU would defend Nazis, for God's sakes, in court. But that time seems to be passing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If you disagree with what somebody says, then you want to kick them off of Facebook, you want to kick them out of the society, you want to put them in jail. No, we really need to get back to agreeing to disagree.
And I am with you 100%. I hope that we preserve what's left of civil rights. And I want to actually come back to that, Rick, because we kind of talked a little bit about privacy. I want to make sure I get through these questions real quick, and then we'll jump into that next topic, because we got 20 minutes left roughly. Johnny said, thank you for the quick answer to the respectable lawyer guest. 20 years ago, discovery for a trial took me 1 hour tops at a photocopier. These days, it takes a day plus scanning in emails and photo documents. Thank God I'm retiring soon, says Wayne. A lot of the time, laws are interpreted by judges, lawyers, etc. AI at present can't interpret what the intent of the lawmakers was at the time of writing those laws. And I would argue neither can a lot of other people.
But I'd rather have humans making those judgments than computers.
Agreed. Love the dice in gambling called reproduction. What? Rick, your opinion on the USA right to repair movement. And if you're not familiar with it, I'll be happy to You probably are, actually.
I am, yeah. I think that that there must be a balance between um, uh, the consumer and the manufacturer, and there are certain rights that consumers must have, but there are also certain rights that manufacturers must have, and you have to balance them against each other. So the right to repair movement, I guess it depends on the facts. Give me an example, and I'll tell you what I think.
Okay, so since we do a lot of this around here. One thing, back in '94, I started working on cell phones, as we talked about earlier. And more recently, within the last 5 or 10 years, it has become difficult to acquire the parts and the information that we need in order to repair as a third-party independent company. So we are not affiliated with Apple or Samsung or anyone else along those lines.
Right.
And we pretty much, to a certain extent, back in the old days, we figured it out. There were no instructions, there were no tutorials. You got your screwdriver and your pry tools and hope you didn't break anything in the process. And if you were able to fix it, you could save customers hundreds of dollars, because their only option was to go to the manufacturer who said, we don't fix broken stuff. You get another one, you buy a new one. So, what's currently going on, and Apple's really probably the most high profile example of this, because they've got such a huge market share in the US and, arguably a lot of the world. They're actually number 3 in the world. But what happens is we say, we need to know how to fix these properly. If you don't tell us, we'll figure it out, but it would be in the consumer's best interest and our best interest, and probably the reputation of your company's best interest, if you allowed us access to OEM parts so that people can get the same quality that they would get if they bought a brand new device.
Right.
And also if we had access to the schematics that tell us how these things are put together and how to troubleshoot them, et cetera. And for the most part, Apple in particular, and probably a number of other companies, kind of hide behind the proprietary shield that says, if we tell you or give you anything that would be competitive to us in some way, that information would leak to other people and we'd be put out of business. So there's this barrier between third-party repair.
Right.
And it's easy from my perspective. Obviously, I'm biased. So it's easy for me to just say, Apple just wants your money. That's why they're not cooperating. They don't care about how much stuff ends up in a landfill. They want you to spend. And Apple will say, well, we don't want you to undertake any dangerous operations like removing a battery from a phone, because we know batteries blow up the moment you look at them funny, right? So I know I'm exaggerating, but this is kind of, as you mentioned, we're trying to find the middle ground. And since the manufacturers seem to be dead set against providing us with that, the right to repair movement started up. And we went through this with the automobile industry a long time ago, where they said you shouldn't have to go to Ford to get your Ford car serviced. You should be able to.
How was that solved? How was that solved?
How was that solved? They, from the Magnuson-Moss Act of
Correct. Politics, okay, legislation. This is how we solve problems in a capitalist society. In a capitalist society, the job of a corporation is to make money for their shareholders. And if you're a true capitalist, you have to respect that. On the other hand, the job of a consumer is to decide what they're going to buy and what they're going to do with it after they buy it. And if you buy something, how many of your readers have bought these products without ever looking at the licensing terms, without ever reading the fine print? Okay, I started doing that some years ago. We have blogged about it a little bit, and it was really hilarious, because if you really read those things, you'd never buy anything. And we call that in the law a contract of adhesion. In consumer law, that means that a contract is so onerous and has so much fine print and is so pro-seller or so pro-vendor that the court deems it to be, quote, unconscionable. So if you believe that these proprietary claims are, quote, unconscionable, hire a lawyer, file a class action suit, and let the courts decide. Or hire a lobbyist, go to Washington, and change the law. In effect, if you are violating the terms of a manufacturer's rules about what can be done and who has the right to repair, and do we have to sell you OEM parts and all of that stuff, in effect, you are knowingly breaching a contract that you made when you bought the product in the first place, which is why I say buy Android.
Okay, fair enough.
But yeah, the answer to all this is either political by legislation or litigation. And there you go. We're going to have lawyers forever because you're going to need a lawyer to do that. And I'm sure that there are going to be, there may already be, I haven't been following it that closely. There may be right to repair lawsuits already. I don't know.
Well, what they seem to be doing is approaching state government officials. They've had various hearings and so forth where they're trying.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, they're trying to convince them to write something at the state level, which unfortunately I don't think, in my amateurish opinion, of course, I think that's going to be a tough way to go about it, because if you don't do it at the federal level, then what do you create a market where you can only sell under certain conditions to this state and it's going to be different somewhere else? I mean, does that even ever work out?
Sometimes, but it takes a while.
Kind of like we're trying to do with the whole net neutrality thing here. You know, California is looking at something and Washington passed something, but
yeah,
will it get anywhere?
Well, I don't know.
They've got, here's the thing, and as you mentioned, you know, you lobby, you hire a lawyer and so forth, but the large corporations obviously have the resources and the deep pockets to get the best lawyers that there are, and to say we will lobby, you know, every day of the week at the state capitol or in Washington or whatever it is, whereas the consumers can't really, you know, do any, even small businesses can't really be expected to do something like that.
Well, now wait a minute. I seem to remember there was a book written called Unsafe at Any Speed about a car in the 60s. The consumer advocate's name was Ralph Nader. Are you too young to remember Ralph?
No, I remember when he was supposed to run for president, I want to say back in the 90s or so.
Ralph Nader was just a public interest lawyer working in a public interest law firm that he created. And he got ticked off because the Corvair was an unsafe car, in his opinion. And he just started writing and speaking and politicizing and going places. And ultimately, he wrote that book. And that book was the most popular book in my college class. In effect, he created the consumer movement. So when you say consumers can't do anything, well, they can. They have to organize. They have to work hard. They have to have somebody like Ralph Nader who's willing to get out there and work for very little money in a very tacky little office, and get out there and move mountains. And basically, during the Carter administration, Ralph Nader made some headway. He got some real consumer laws passed that were very strong. So that goes back to the political solution, but consumers do have a lot of power. Now, they have something other than political power. They've got buying power. Okay, you don't like what the manufacturers are doing under right to repair? Don't buy their product. Hello? You know, what is the most powerful thing you can do to a large corporation that sells a lot of products? Not buy their product. So again, it comes back to us. If we're willing to do something, if we're willing to act, if we're willing to get together, we have a lot of power as consumers. You know, and that's not pie in the sky. That's real.
Yeah, fair. And that's fair. And probably the awareness level is one of the biggest obstacles here, because as you notice, you know, if you're in the phone repair business, you're well aware of the right to repair movement. If you're a consumer, you go to Apple, you get what you get. When your phone do what they tell you, you complain about it, but you don't go buy some other brand because you're locked into that ecosystem because you like it.
Whose fault is that?
Well,
whose fault is that?
It is what it is. So we try to fill that gap for people. And there was another related comment here. Arthur Thing, actually mentioned, don't forget John Deere. So the right to repair movement is much bigger than consumer electronics. There are farmers and there are medical facilities that are suffering from downtime, which is invaluable to them because they don't have access to the information they need to repair their equipment. You know, if you're harvesting in the Midwest somewhere and your John Deere tractor is disabled because of software, and you say, we've got to harvest today, and they say, we'll send a technician out in 2 weeks, you know, that creates an obvious problem. So as a result, we have farmers who have had to resort to downloading information from some website in Ukraine who has pirated the software that they need to get their tractor going again. I mean, it's crazy.
No, I think you're right. But the problem with that is that when they bought the tractor, they knew what they were buying, allegedly. Okay. When they bought the tractor, did they ask John Deere whether or not they'd have the right to repair it? Did they negotiate through their lawyer a contract with the seller of the John Deere tractor that set forth the terms in the contract? Did they negotiate those terms? You know, there are a lot of things that a competent consumer or business can do when negotiating to buy a high volume or a high price product. Uh, if I say to John Deere, look, if you don't give me assurances in my contract that I'm going to be able to get the software that I need to keep this tractor going for however long we negotiate, then I'm going to go buy a Kubota or I'm going to go buy another brand. You know, it's all comes down to, as you say, competition, but don't compete with yourself, negotiate. All right. Too many businessmen as well as consumers enter into contracts without ever asking a lawyer's advice. Yeah, some lawyers probably are too expensive, but if I had a nickel for every time a client came to me with a problem that could have been solved if they'd come to me before they signed the contract, I'd be rich.
Right.
I'm not.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but we all know the reality of that. And we'll get to that in a second because it'll be a great segue into our next section. Greg, as you mentioned, said what? Everyone does not read Apple's 16-page terms of agreements. Come on, in the App Store, what's wrong with you people? And I agree. Come on, we all click yes. Just do it. Continue. Okay, whatever. And then you go, wait, I just agreed to delete everything off of my device. That's not what I meant to click on. I mean, it's become a habit, right? So since we're getting towards the end here, I do want to get into the privacy thing, Rick, while we have you, because this is one of the things that we're all more likely engaging in without, other than people who are involved in being an attorney or something along those lines. Mm-hmm. I've agreed to so many things that I just recently realized that, you installed Facebook Messenger on your phone. You've also agreed to allow your microphone access and then photo gallery and so forth. And when we think about privacy, even for me, and I grew up in pretty much the 80s, and we had all sorts of interesting sayings, along the lines of, hey, it's a free country, do whatever you want. Well, you don't hear that expression anymore. Nobody says that. Or, people felt it seemed like privacy was really taken for granted at that point. We just assumed it's in the Constitution. You have a right to it. There it is. And, if you want information.
There are different kinds of privacy. First of all, privacy is dead. In an era where everything is computerized, where we have Echo devices and Google Assistant in every room of the house, if there's a bad actor out there, you have no privacy. Your data is going to be available, and it's more easily available every day. So let's start with that. Privacy isn't about the technology to spy on you. Privacy isn't about the government spying on you or Apple or other large corporations like Google using your data to sell products. Privacy is about what is your government willing to do to protect you in the event that your data is compromised. So let's assume, or you should assume in this society, that everything you do is going to be on a camera. It's going to be on a closed circuit camera. It's going to be on a video camera like we're doing right now. You should assume when you get up in the morning that every word that you say is likely, if someone wants to, going to be on a camera. And they're going to know what you said and who you said it to. Now, once we assume that, the trick is, how do we protect ourselves from bad actors misusing that information? And the laws and the enforcement of the laws are the way that we do that. You merely make it so onerous for a company to misuse your data by the use of laws that they won't do it. Good example. Do you really believe that Google or any other large corporation wants your data to be accused of hacking your data and making it available to the world? That's a company killer. Okay. As soon as it gets out that there's been a data breach like that, what's going to happen to the users? They're going to run. So large corporations are more interested in data security than you are. Now, will they use your data to sell products? Sure. Will they sell your data without identifiers to third-party companies, which they shouldn't, but will they do it? Yeah, because they make money doing it. But the question is, they're betting their company every time they do that. Now, assume that you don't have any privacy, but also assume that you have the right to protect your privacy. Does that make sense? You have given it up. You've given up the ability to get to your data through the adoption of technology. But if they misuse your data, you have the right to redress. You can sue them, you can hire lawyers, you can do whatever you want to do. Now, this all takes away from the real principle here, and that is that there are good sides to the lack of privacy. Why do we agree to all these things? Why do we agree to share our microphone? Well, because we want to use the benefits of the technology. You know, why do I allow Google to see what I buy and what I browse? Because I want them to suggest to me a product that I want to buy. I want them to be able to know enough about me to tailor the search results to what I want in my life. I want to be able to say, hey, Google, what are my appointments today? And have the verify your voice. There you go. My Google Assistant is talking to me already. So see, Google's listening to me. And when I say the code word, hey, Google, it's going to think I'm talking to it. So we want to be able to ask these questions of our computers. We want to be able to use our browsers in a way that is efficient and productive for us. But then we turn around and we complain about misuse of privacy. You know, we got to pick our poison here. If you really want to get off the grid, you can, but your life is not going to be as much fun as it is when you have a computer helping you. I hope that makes sense.
Oh, it makes sense. You know, and it's funny because ironically, they just had something come out. Actually, someone mentioned in the chat, and I was reading about this earlier today, that Facebook has started using the phone numbers that people have provided for their two-factor authentication for advertisers to use. So, you know, on that topic,
I have a problem with that.
Well, you know, like you said, we probably agreed to those terms at some point that they could do whatever they like with our phone numbers, and we already know anything that you upload to Facebook, and whether it's in a private gallery or not, that is their property. They can in fact use it for advertising purposes if they want. They can take your picture and go, "Look, I'm having a great time on wherever," and they own it. It's crazy.
Which is why some of the sites are going to three-factor authentication. So you want something you know, something you own, and something you use. So, by the way, while we're talking about this, from a computer security perspective, if you want to protect your privacy, if you want to protect your data, you should be using two-factor authentication on everything. See, we are lazy, all right? We don't want to go through the steps. We don't want to have a code sent to our phone and have to type in the code to get to a website. But I'm telling you that if you really are worried about your privacy, if you're really worried about your data, you must use two-factor authentication. Simple.
You want to hear something funny, Rick? I am all about that. I've got on my YouTube channel, on any online account that has a 2FA option, I'm opting in 100% of the time. Recently, I went to visit my bank and I said, you know, I do some online banking. How do I enable two-factor authentication? And they looked at me like they didn't know what I was talking about. It's the second time I brought it up in front of a teller.
Go to another bank.
I think I'm going to have to, because, well, I asked the guy, I said, hey, you know, we're talking about money here. So most people take that pretty seriously. I'm trusting you with my assets. Mm-hmm. Why don't you have two-factor authentication? And this is like the third time I asked, and this particular teller kind of did the, you know, off the record between us. Banks are going to do whatever the government, the laws tell them that they have to. So unless there's a requirement by law, don't look forward to that anytime soon, which really just kind of blew me away. That why would you not want to protect your customers' confidence? Like you mentioned, we want to believe that these institutions are reliable, but they're not even up to date with two-factor authentication when it comes to technology.
I would not use a bank website or anything associated with finances that did not only use two-factor authentication, but didn't ask you a security question along with the two-factor authentication. So in other words, you use a username and password to gain access to the site. They then prompt you to send a two-factor authentication code to your cell phone. They send that code, you enter the code, and then they ask you a security question, the third factor.
Right.
So you really need more than even two-factor authentication. Although, you know, my email has been out on the dark web for probably 3 years, and I haven't been hacked because of 2 and 3-factor authentication.
Interesting.
They don't have my phone.
Right. Well, although if they can call customer service
in the Ukraine,
in the Ukraine,
yeah.
You did hear about the big T-Mobile fiasco where they called customer service and got the SIM reprogrammed, and then they had your phone number and your email account.
There you go.
Anyways, hey, Rick, if I can have you stand by for just a second, I know I really appreciate you coming on. I know it's much later there in Florida.
Anytime.
I hope that everyone there in the chat enjoyed the stream tonight. I'm going to have to cut it off. It is 7 o'clock, and it's getting late on that end of the country. Thank everyone so much for showing up here. If you like this video, please remember to hit the like button down there in the description. And also, if you haven't done so already, definitely check out Rick's blog. Let me see if we can get it on the screen here for you again. It is at FutureLawyer.com. Let's present that so we can see it. There we go. You should definitely check it out. Interesting articles, and again, exactly the type of stuff that we are interested in as technicians and fans of tech and everything else. So we will talk to you next Monday, 2 p.m. in the afternoon Pacific time. And then again, next Thursday, we will be back with some conspiracy stuff. I think Real World Review is going to be joining me for that one. We'll figure out what the topic is. I'll let you know. Thanks again, and have a great weekend.